You're watching Telecom TV from Mobile World Congress 2016 in Barcelona. And I'm joined now by Sudeep Gautam, who is VP and General Manager of Global Mobility Services, Advisory and Transformation at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Sudeep, very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, glad to be here, Guy.
Well, we're going to talk today about the digital enterprise and how we push the boundaries towards the digital enterprise. But before we do, can we look at this subject of digital obsolescence and what we mean by digital obsolescence?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting topic, right? I mean, businesses are happy. They've successfully ridden the second generation of the digital wave to defend, extend, create, and disintermediate their business models. However, that world's going to change, right? The sheer nature of the digital technologies that are imminent are going to radically transform the world the way we know it, right? And that's going to force competition to be coming from all sorts of unexpected places. So organizations or companies, irrespective of sizes, if they are not going to be leveraging or unlocking the true potential of these technologies, then there's a likelihood that these companies are going to become irrelevant over a period of time. So far, they have been focusing on innovation and digital transformation purely in bursts or in an incremental fashion. And when you do such important things in an incremental fashion, the fact of the matter is that you do not achieve breakthrough results. And that's when the concept of digital obsolescence comes in, because these companies, sooner or later, believe it or not, will become obsolete, will become irrelevant.
So for a company that wants to execute this digital strategy, what are some of the problems that they encounter?
So, well, essentially what's happening is that there's been a seismic shift in the way humans, you and I, the way we think, the way we communicate, the way we shop, the way we engage, the way we just go about doing, leading our lives on a day-to-day basis. And technologies such as mobility, cloud, big data innovation, and even the Internet of Things, these are arriving in our daily lives, right? Now, what's essentially happening is that with these technologies, it requires a very different mindset, right, to extract the full potential of these kinds of technologies. And the fact of the matter is that many organizations do not leverage it to the fullest extent. So the problem is essentially threefold. The first thing is the lack of a digitally inept culture within that particular organization. So, for example, with all these technologies coming, the way you engage with these technologies, the way you build them, the way you actually invest in them, or the way you structure your organization is very different from the way you've done it in the past with your legacy technologies, right? So the problem really is that most of the organizations today their culture is still aligned to the legacy ways, right? So specifically, if you look at it, there's a big confusion. Most organizations try to confuse the word digitization with digital transformation, okay? Now, digitization, pure simple terms, is purely the expansion of core business processes onto digital platforms, right? However, digital transformation is how you leverage digital technologies to fundamentally and radically transform a particular process into another, right? And that's where really the magic happens, right? So essentially, when people are doing digitization, they're doing more of the same. They're just doing it more efficiently, more quickly, and obviously more cost effectively. But essentially, it's more of the same. The second thing is that these organizations have not yet been able to identify the full customer experience across multiple channels. So you have various channels today, right? You have the web, you have mobile, you have a bunch of other places, the brick and mortar organizations. And there is no 360-degree view of the customer, right? So that's a big problem. The third thing is that a lot of these organizations, especially the large ones, they're all listed companies. So, and the stock exchanges, as they're listed out there, they are under tremendous pressure to perform on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis. As a result of which, what really happens is any kind of innovation is more like an island within those organizations rather than being holistic and to the core of the business, right? So and that's where the failure starts to happen, right? Now, the second part is that the new technologies that are coming, especially the digital technologies, they bring in their more complexities. I mean, these are cool technologies, but they have major complexities and challenges, right? And organizations have huge challenges matching their capabilities with what's coming out, right? So specifically there's a big multi-channel coordination quagmire. Data, access, and applications have added complexities, right? Business processes have been designed for transactions, not really for engagement. That's another big problem, right? Middleware, applications, and security models have been very poorly constructed. And the reason for that essentially is that because all these models and these solutions have been created on a kind of an ad hoc basis, right? They've all been incremental, as I mentioned. So that's a big problem. And finally, by 2020, we anticipate that there are going to be over 1 trillion applications out there. Now, when you talk about 1 trillion applications, what essentially we're talking about is these are applications these are mobile applications, they are cloud native applications, these are web scale applications, applications to power the Internet of Things, applications to engage, applications to understand, applications to analyze, right? Now the real challenge is that how do you balance these new applications? How do you develop these applications while maintaining the workloads of those systems that currently maintain your business, right? So that's a big challenge, and many organizations don't have a clue how to start and, hey, where do I start, right? And the final issue really that we see in enterprises, which is preventing them from really moving forward in the digital space is the lack of investment. So first of all, while the CEO, so when I talk about investments, I'm also talking about investments in terms of effort and time and focus, as well as in terms of capital, right? So when you're talking about effort and time, right, sustained effort and time, while the CEO focus over digital technologies has increased over the last, I would say, couple of years, board level engagement still remains stagnant. And that is a big issue because what happens is, this is not a 6-month or a 1-year journey. This is at least a 10 to 15 year journey, right? Because these technologies are here to stay and they're going to morph into something even more sophisticated. So if board members are not staying engaged with the organization and what their digital initiatives are, that's a big problem. The second thing is, as I mentioned earlier, any kind of innovation that happens purely in isolation in terms of islands, right? And as a result of which the amount of money that is spent is minuscule. And I would suggest that these are essentially the big issues that are impacting organizations from moving forward.
Fascinating. So moving on, what would you say are the characteristics of an agile digital enterprise?
Yeah, so these are organizations that have actually invested ahead of the adoption curve in people, processes, and technologies to build digital platforms that can reach massive scale, right? These organizations also have tremendous leadership, which has put in place a culture that is very conducive for extracting the full potential of these digital technologies, right? But you got to take a step back and ask the question really is that, okay, what do you mean by the characteristics? I mean, what are those real traits these organizations possess? Yes, they've got a great leadership, they build great platforms, but now what? At the end of it, what are they able to do to really unlock that potential? So the first thing is that these organizations are extremely responsive to strategic opportunities and growth, right? The second thing is that anything which is concerned with their products or their service, they have extremely short life cycles for making decisions, for having production cycles, as well as for review cycles, right? Extremely short and effective, right? The third is that they have a lot of focus on the organizational as well as the individual growth mindset. I mean, they're very focused on their employees, and as a result of which, they automatically focus on their organizational growth mindset. And that's extremely important for getting this whole thing going, right? And the other thing is there's an unwavering focus on customer centricity, right? Extremely important because when you start thinking every process in the organization from a customer's perspective, that really changes the dynamics of how everything is built, right? And finally, these organizations do not work in silos, right? They have interdisciplinary collaborative teams that work together to kind of build great systems and products out there, right? So this in my mind would constitute a true agile, a digitally agile organization.
So if we look at the big picture here, how do we transition to this notion of a digital republic?
Yes. So the first thing is that organizations need to think more ambitiously and creatively about what this technology really enables, right? They need to invest in relevant digital technologies that align to their strategy, right? These organizations also need to compete at a hyperscale, right? So hyperscale companies have actually, they have tremendous amount of operating leverage because of the platforms they have developed that can reach massive scale, right? These organizations should also use a horizon-based model to their digital strategy. So for example, very clearly bring out what your digital imperatives are, right? And how are you going to, and put actions on each of those strategic imperatives in terms of what are you going to enable, what are you going to enhance, and essentially what are you going to disrupt. Once you map that out, lay it across a particular timeline, and you'll start seeing a full execution roadmap of yours. And finally, do not focus purely on product innovation. Now, we have a tendency that mostly innovation belongs to product companies, which in my belief is extremely dangerous because you need to focus on innovation even in the service area, right? So focus on service innovation. So institutionalize essentially service innovation, personalize the customer experience, and keep service delivery simple. That's what customers like. And from a technology perspective, three things. First is that make leaps, not steps, to a hybrid infrastructure. Extremely important. Extract the fullest value out of your big data investments. Now, how do you do that? You actually make sure that you modernize your business intelligence systems. That's one. The second thing you do is you start integrating your analytics with business applications. And finally, you model, you predict, and you personalize customer experience. And of course, the final thing from a technology perspective is that you have to extract the best out of mobility, right? And when you do that, essentially, you start creating differentiation through speed, security, and personalization. So this would actually constitute a solid playbook for organizations that really want to transition to the digital republic, as I call it.
So you must have come across some good examples of organizations that are making this digital transition.
It's very interesting, Guy. I mean, there are organizations. Now, the common organizations that you and I know of on a day-to-day basis are, three fantastic examples. I mean, Uber is a great example of what they have done to disrupt the entire taxi industry, right? And if you look at their valuation, it's amazing. It's much higher than most of the organizations with, real people and real manufacturing bases, right? The second company I can think of is Tesla, right? They totally eliminated the entire dealer network in between and straight away went to the consumer through their digital channels, right? Nike is another great example. I mean, I would call Nike like an ecosystem shaper because this organization has actually done extremely well to integrate and all their digital channels and provide a very compelling value to the consumer out there, right? But let's take a step back because the organizations that I just mentioned or the examples I mentioned are purely, these are disruptive or ecosystem shapers. Tesla and Uber are brand new companies, so they had an opportunity to think and bring this opportunity and this idea out and build something fantastic. But there are a lot of cool examples of also organizations that have existed for decades and they have actually gone and really started transforming themselves. And that's where you really start to marvel saying that, okay, how did a company of this culture really start transforming itself? And two examples come to my mind. One of these is actually a large, chemical manufacturer. And what they did was they're actually trying to create a fantastic decision support system for their customers, which are essentially the farmers or the growers, right? And they're going to actually revolutionize the entire agricultural industry by creating this decision support system, almost like a Facebook or a LinkedIn for that community and this ecosystem. So as a result of which, these growers would be able to prescribe or subscribe to their best practices based on their land conditions, their soil conditions, their weather, the climatic scenarios, and actually this company would actually be able to guarantee yields based on the best practices that the grower follows, right? Now that's a very cool example of how you're getting an entire ecosystem coming onto a digital platform and essentially increasing sales ultimately for the company. Another organization that comes to my mind is a very large logistics carrier. And what they did was they have spent billions and billions of dollars in the assets they have within their organization. And they have actually automated the entire process of plant maintenance and asset management to mobile, all based on cloud, right? So these are examples, very fine examples of organizations which have actually taken something in a traditional form of an organization and traditional way of working and have quickly adapted the digital technology to really get something out that users can enjoy.
Absolutely fascinating. Plenty for us to think about. Sudeep, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Guy.